So I'm Aaron Blocker. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about living with Crohn's disease. So in 2009, when I was 17 years old, I was diagnosed with a form of inflammatory bowel disease called Crohn's disease. At this time, I did not know much about the disease at all. I'd never really heard of it. It came up in one of my appointments with my pediatric doctor, my primary care pediatric doctor, just as this could be Crohn's disease, but we don't know for sure. So I didn't know much about it. I was still a pediatric patient, even though I was 17. I had just started college because I graduated a little early. So this was all very new to me. If you don't know what Crohn's disease is, so it's a form of inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. It's an immune-mediated condition where your immune system reacts to things that typically it wouldn't react to, like bacteria or food that are in the gut, and it causes this immune reaction, and it starts attacking your gut. For Crohn's disease, it can attack anywhere from the mouth all the way down to the anus. And then there's another form of inflammatory bowel disease, which is the other common form, is ulcerative colitis. This is just in your colon or your large bowel. And there are a few differences, but primarily with it being confined to your colon is the biggest difference. So they're treated similarly. There are a few things that may differ down the treatment path, but they're very similar. And then there is what they call indeterminate colitis, where they aren't really sure if it's Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, because you can have Crohn's disease that is confined to the colon. So there are some cases where they aren't really sure which form it is. So when I was 17 years old, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I was 5'9", 5'10". I weighed like 100 pounds. I was very skinny and malnourished and just didn't eat a lot, had no appetite, threw up. Some of the symptoms that I experienced would range from constipation to diarrhea to bloody diarrhea to nausea to vomiting to no appetite, all of these things, and just generally feeling not well. So after a long, probably about a year of going down the path of seeing a pediatric GI doctor and having a lot of tests done that included imaging, scopes, so an upper scope where they go through the mouth, and then a lower scope where they go through the anus and check the colon, and then a pill cam, which is kind of cool. You swallow a pill that's a camera, and it takes like 70,000 pictures all the way through your entire GI tract. Ultimately, the pill cam and some blood work and stuff led to my diagnosis of Crohn's disease. I have small bowel Crohn's disease, which is hard to diagnose, hence the pill cam. And so I was thrust into this world of being somewhat healthy. Obviously I had been sick and I was going through, the diagnostic process of trying to get diagnosed with a GI disease, which ultimately was diagnosed with. But you're thrust into this world of not necessarily going to the doctor that much. I mean, of course, you go like when you're sick, and then as you potentially have a chronic illness, you do start going more. But as soon as you're diagnosed, it is a whirlwind of things that you go through. Not just all the testing that you had done, and some of it was back and forth of lab works and scopes and imaging, like MRIs and CT scans. It was just a very wild time to get to that point. And then all of a sudden, you're diagnosed with the disease. So what does that mean? What does that look like? What is this disease? Is it going to kill me? Am I going to be okay? There's all these things that happen at once. And, thankfully, I had a really good team, a really good pediatric GI doctor who kind of coached me through it. And I was initially hospitalized, I think, probably a few weeks after my diagnosis, which was about September, October of 2009. A few weeks later, about a month later, I was put in the hospital just because I was very sick. My weight was dropping. I was in what we call flare up, meaning the disease was very active. And I was just very, very sick. So I got admitted to the hospital, spent a couple weeks in the hospital, had an NG tube, which is a nasogastric tube. Not fun, but they help get you some nutrition, fluids, and steroids, and all of these things. It's really you don't really get sleep in the hospital because people are coming in and checking on you and taking blood work and taking you for imaging, and It was just as I said, a very wild time. So, it was my first semester of college as well. So that was also very hard to adjust to. I was adjusting to college. I was adjusting to getting diagnosed with this disease, this chronic illness that was going to be with me for the rest of my life, and I had no clue what the outcome of any of this was going to be. All I knew in that moment is that I wanted to feel better. I wanted to get better, and that was my main goal because I can't finish college if I, am sick all the time and constantly flaring and in and out of the hospital. So my main goal in that moment was to just get better. And when you're sick like that, and the one thing that the way that I try to explain like a flare up with Crohn's disease to people is that if you've ever had any kind of stomach bug, stomach virus, food poisoning, that where you're throwing up, you have diarrhea, and there's this urgency, and you just feel awful and nauseous, and you just very sick from that. That's what for me in those worst times of living with Crohn's disease was like that. But add in abdominal pain, and you're losing blood, and it's the abdominal pain is one thing that was very severe for me early on. So it's like that. So you want to get better. You will when you're that sick, typically will do whatever you need to do to try to get on a path to being healthier. So that's what we did. I had a really good care team. I got put in the hospital, kind of got me stable enough to kind of get out and start working on a treatment regimen that would work for me. I initially took a ton of pills, nausea medicine, anti-inflammatory medicine, just spasm, like GI spasm medicine, like all these medicines, steroids. And eventually, probably about 6 months after my diagnosis, I would get put on a biologic, my first biologic. This was an infusion drug that I had every 8 weeks. The initial dose was, one infusion. The infusions took about 2.5 to 3 hours. And then 2 weeks later, I'd have another infusion. And then 4 weeks after that, I would have an infusion, and then which is called the loading dose. And then I would get on a regular 8-week schedule. This biologic medicine was a game changer for me. After about 2 infusions, I felt significantly better. I was able to get off steroids. It was a huge deal. If you've ever been on steroids for anything, even a short period of time, they make you feel terrible. They have horrible side effects. So that was a big deal for me. I was kind of steroid dependent up until that point. So I was able to get off those steroids and start feeling like a normal person in a way, in terms of the way that I felt. Obviously, it wasn't normal. I was going every 8 weeks to get infusions at a cancer clinic with, a bunch of different patients. And my life was anything but normal, but I felt more normal than I had in a very long time. And for me, and I ended up in remission. So you can get in remission. There are different stages of remission. What you want to be in is like deep remission, what they call deep remission, where you don't really have any signs of the disease, your clinical symptoms, so the nausea, the vomiting, the diarrhea, all that's settled down. Your blood work, like lab work, is good, and your colonoscopies and stuff, your biopsies are clean. So you're in this very deep, stable remission. Does that mean that I don't have any symptoms? No. There are things where, so you have damage to your bowel. Oftentimes, some of that can't be completely fixed. And then a lot of us will have IBS with IBD, so irritable bowel syndrome is not the same thing as IBD. Please don't get that mixed up. A lot of people do. There's two very different things with some overlapping symptoms. However, there are a lot of patients with IBD who develop IBD that develop IBS, so that has a little bit of symptoms with it as well. So it doesn't mean that it's perfect for everybody, and a lot of people unfortunately don't ever get into a deep remission, and it's a very challenging disease to treat, and it's a spectrum of of diseases and things that people experience. So what I like to say is my experience is not going to be the same as somebody else with the IBD. There are people who don't respond to the medication that I respond to, and I may not respond to the medication that somebody else responds to. So it's very broad. However, my experience is that I have been, was able to get in that deep remission. And, yeah, it was that medication was a game changer for me. I'm not on that same medication now. I'm on a different biologic that's similar to that, but it's an injection. I can do at home, and I am still in remission, thankfully, and I'm very very grateful for that. And I know that any day that could change, and there are still bumps in the road, of course. I've had some what I call mini flares here and there, where kind of disease peaks up a little bit, where I'll have some diarrhea and or some constipation because I experienced that as well. But it's never anything that lasts. It comes in a couple days and then I'm done with it, thankfully. And so yeah, it's not perfect at all, but what I like to say is that remission for me is there are way more good days than bad days, and that's true for me right now. A little bit about kind of my advocacy work that I've done. I know I spoke about this before, but inflammatory being diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease and Crohn's disease is what started my patient advocacy journey. I was diagnosed in 2009, and about middle of 2010, I started a Facebook page, which at the time was very new. Pages, from my experience, hadn't been around that long, so it was very new. But I didn't know anybody with the disease, and truthfully, when I started my advocacy work, it was just to meet other people that were living with IBD, so that I could hear their experience and see how they were doing. And that occurred. I've met so many people through that and talked to so many people with the disease, and it's very encouraging to hear from other people, to hear from other patients, because people who have lived with your disease and kind of been in your shoes in a way is very encouraging, and that support is something that you can't really get from anybody else. And even though my disease is not the same as somebody else, there are these experiences that we have together, that we can help each other with. And while our disease may not respond to the same medication, we still have to have colonoscopies and EGDs and see all these different specialists. So it's very, very helpful when you find your community, especially living with a disease like inflammatory bowel disease. So I started that, and I met so many people, and it really kind of turned into this whirlwind of a journey with this page. I mean, I again initially started to meet people, but I saw that it was growing, and I think part of it is that I got into like the Facebook pages and stuff early on where it was new, and so there were people who really flocked to it. And so I went through a period of really like crazy growth, like organic growth, and I was like, I think that this can be more. This can be something that is a community, but can also be a space where people can help each other and talk to each other and connect. And not only that, I think that I can make this into something that helps sort of educate patients or people interested in learning about the disease, and sharing my story and their story, and honestly sharing my story like this is a way that kind of I cope. Sharing my story helps me, and I hope that it helps other people, but it immensely helps myself. So I was like, I think that this could be something really incredible. And so I really dug in and tried to curate this space where people felt comfortable sharing talking about their disease. And while not all of the time it was private, there were ways for people to connect. And obviously I made mistakes. I had to learn a lot about the disease and all of these things. And I'm not going to say that early on in my journey that I was perfect and I didn't put anything out that had misinformation. And I've tried to correct all of that. But it really catapulted my patient advocacy journey and my love for that, for helping other patients or caregivers or anybody affected by the disease. Partly because, again, finding that community is something that is hard to come by, that can really just nurture you and help you through your journey. So that's part of it. And the other part is I genuinely like helping people. So fast forward, here I am. That was 2010. It's 2023. It's 13 years later, and that page is over 26,000 people on it. And while in a lot of places that's not huge, it's a big deal because it's been organic growth, and it's really been something that I'm very proud of, and has allowed me to meet so many amazing people, so many patients and physicians and scientists, and to work with pharmaceutical companies and nonprofits. And I have friends who I've met through this page that are genuinely like family at this point. I mean, we send each other Christmas cards, and we celebrate each other's wins, and get to see each other in person at events, and just genuinely invest in each other's lives. And it's one of the most incredible things I've ever experienced. And what I like to say is that none of that would have happened without the diagnosis of Crohn's disease. So something that was really awful for me at the time and still can be really terrible has spawned something that is really incredible, and I'm very grateful for that. And so I have a website, and I have this page, and I'm on social media, and I try to be as active as I can. And I have a background in biomedical research in terms of my education, and so I've done some research type articles, and been on some research papers, and try to really help break down the science of the disease, and also share my story with others, and create this educational material. And it's been so fun and so incredible, and something that I could never have imagined 10 years ago, or when I was diagnosed, that it would turn into this. And again, I'm very grateful. So living with disease has been so challenging. I've had many ups, many downs, and I've had to switch physicians and change medications, and lost remission at one point. And I'm at the doctor all the time, and I have another disease that I live with, a rare disease called hyperphosphatasia, which I'll talk about in another video. But this disease is so challenging to live with, and again, there are a lot of people who are not in remission, and who have had a ton of surgeries, and don't respond to medications like I do. And so I try to be grateful for what I have been through, and where I'm at in my journey, but also be empathetic to others who are not where I'm at, and try to provide that support where I can. And so, this disease is challenging. It's hard, but I try my best to be positive about it for people, and to say that you can get through this. And I do believe that. And while the journey is not easy, and you may be in a place that is not good, you're not in remission, maybe you just had surgery, but there are people who support you, and there's community out there. I'm here. So again, it's been a crazy journey for me personally, and I still deal with this disease every single day, and I have scopes and medications and all of this stuff. But it has really pushed me into this patient advocacy world, and allowed me to be empathetic, and to help people, and to share my story. And I hope to continue that. And part of why I'm doing this is that's just the evolution of kind of where I've come from. But yeah, I'm Aaron Blocker. I live with Crohn's disease, and this is me. This is my story, and kind of what I'm about. So thank you for tuning in. I'll have more videos about what Crohn's disease is, inflammatory bowel disease. I'll talk next about living with an ultra rare disease, hyperphosphatasia. But thank you for listening. I hope this has helped you as much as it's helping me.